ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, generative AI, we have seen dramatic advances in the last couple of months. So many people started to create new stuff, great content, but it's also possible to abuse these models for generating misinformation, deepfakes, and we want to discuss about what happens to our society, and I would be happy if you join our talk.
Welcome to talk.cybersecurity.fr.
Bienvenue.
Welcome to the 32nd edition of Talk CyberCNI. So it's a long summer break that we had, and therefore I'm even more excited that we have another edition today, and we have such a great edition with such an interesting and timely topic, especially if you followed the news and read about the things happening around OpenAI and so on. I will not even dive into it because I will do it in the discussion today. So for me, it's also a kind of a restart in the sense that I didn't run the series for quite some editions. Therefore, forgive if there are any technical problems, but I think in general everything should be fine. As usual, here it starts already. What is happening here? So here I am. And I'm also mute, I guess. Test. Okay. So I don't know if you heard me. If not, let me just restart. Sorry for that. Welcome to the 32nd edition of Talk CyberCNI. After a long summer break, we are back with a wonderful topic. You probably heard the news about OpenAI. We'll probably dive into that a little bit today in discussion. I'm super happy welcoming you again after the summer break. We'll be regular from now on again, and therefore, really looking forward to today's edition. As usual, the event is for you, and therefore we are super eager to discuss with you about the topic. And as you will see, today we changed the format or adapted the format a bit, but this is why you have also this little fire in the announcement slide, because we really want to focus on the discussion, because this is what will probably bring also most to you. And therefore we'll be super happy if you have some questions and so on to put them in. As usual, we have Alexander Loth today, who is joining us to moderate the questions and also join the discussion. So welcome to for that. And so here's the link. As usual, it's Talk32. And you can join off this video, so please open the second screen. It's always interesting just to put questions, look at what discussion is going on, upload, download questions, so that you can be part of a discussion. That said, I would directly dive into the topic. So today we have generative AI, ethical quandaries, and the spread of misinformation. You already heard Alex Loth in the trailer. He's from Microsoft, and he was telling us something about what we want to talk about today. And I will briefly introduce Alex. And it's a great pleasure having him here today. So thanks a lot for joining us with this edition. So Alexander Loth is a seasoned digital strategist, data scientist with more than 14 years of experience. He currently works at Microsoft AI for a good research lab. His career includes prestigious roles at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, and leading companies such as Tableau, Gemini, and SAP. He holds an executive MBA with graduate research focused on machine learning algorithms for big data processing, data science, and cybersecurity. He's an accomplished author. Alexander has written several books, including Decisively Digital, Teach Yourself Visually, Power BI, and Visual Analytics with Tableau. And with over 30,000 followers on LinkedIn, he's an influential voice in digital transformation, AI, and business analytics, and he actively shares his insights on social platforms and through his blog. And that shows you that he's very experienced in communicating. This is great, and also in live formats. I'm really looking forward to the session today. And with that said, The format will be Alex will give a short introduction into the topic. He will introduce, as I said, the frame, and then we dive into a longer discussion with all of you in the session. And with that said, Alex, I hand over to you, and I'm looking forward to your first words to setting the stage for today's exciting discussion.
Wow, thank you very much, Mike Oliver, for this really detailed introduction, and it's very exciting to be invited to this format. I prepared some slides, and I don't want to just to show 50, 60, or 70 slides. I just want to use some slides to give an introduction, to have a common sense about what we're talking about, to give a common sense about what is artificial intelligence. And then I would really, really love that we also go into a live discussion, because the things that we have seen, I mean, the possible of, I mean, today we also want to discuss some bad use, some misuse of this great technology about, I mean, the technology of generative AI, and that's what I really would do in a discussion. And let's start a little bit with the setting the scene. So there's not much to add about myself, because Mike Oliver gave such a good and detailed introduction. Just one thing maybe that is interesting, at CERN, at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, this was actually kind of the start where I really found my passion about data, because at this time we had some, well, we were researching on data sets that were in a petabyte scale. So really, really impressive data sets back in these days. And it was plenty of stuff in Python, in C++. And since that time, I mean, even after joining back to the, let's say, to for-profit business, it was still data. Data was still stuff that I was interested in and was working on. And since recently, we have seen that data is just the fuel that you need for running artificial intelligence applications, and all the stuff that we were so fascinated since the since the rise of ChatGPT. This is all fueled by an impressive amount of data. And as mentioned also by Mike Oliver, 2 years ago, I wrote a book with some colleagues and friends. It's called Decisively Digital, and this book at that time had already a broad introduction of what GPT-3 is. At that time, there was no ChatGPT yet, so GPT was still kind of a nerdy thing. So it was not something that was that famous as it is today. And back at that time, GPT-3 was also not that capable. It was mainly an interesting thing to complete sentences. So you could actually start half a sentence, and GPT-3 was able to complete it, and it was quite impressive. But it was not yet a conversational thing. It was not like you have a chat with this application. It was more like it was a funny thing, and it was just not as famous as ChatGPT. But it was already covered in the book, and the book itself, even though it's now 2 years old, I would not say it's outdated, because many fundamentals of AI, they reach back until the 50s. And let's go to the next slide here. I mean, in the 50s, we had already discussions about artificial intelligence, and what it would be possible to, what it won't be possible. And for example, 20 years later, in the 70s, it was believed that a computer will be soon able to beat a human in chess. Actually, it was really believed that it takes a few more years until we achieve that, and it actually lasted more than 20 years to achieve that. So it was way back. It was much later than it was expected, and that was, let's say, a typical thing until recently about artificial intelligence, because it was not a steady progression. We had also a phase called AI winter, so where actually nothing, where it seems that nothing really happened. We have seen this also in the Gartner hype cycle, which had artificial intelligence several times mentioned as the next big thing, and let's say nothing big happened. I said until last November, with the release of ChatGPT, suddenly it looks like it's more than a hype, and artificial intelligence is definitely here to stay. And so, if we talk about artificial intelligence, this is also very, very much linked to machine learning. So while artificial intelligence is more like a broad way of, let's say, the smartness of a computer system, for example, with computer vision to identify, for example, earthquake damages on satellite imagery or self-driving cars. Machine learning is a more narrow thing, and I would say it's the most important subset of artificial intelligence. And this is more about data, about classification, regression, seeing patterns in data. It's like learning on data sets, and this is let's say the one of the core parts of AI, but it's not the same. And it's um, very often in discussions I've seen these terms interchanged. It's just important to know that machine learning is, let's say, the most important ingredients of artificial intelligence. And then there's one important thing. It's called NLP, natural language processing, which is, I would say, it's on the intersection between AI, machine learning, and computer linguistics. So it's actually the way or the methods to make a computer to understand human language, and this plays a huge important role in the current large language models. So this is also a very important ingredient, but it's not as I would say it's partially you can see it in the field of AI, but it's definitely also linked to other parts like computer linguistics. Now let's get one step back before we talk about the large language models. Let's just talk about the progression of artificial intelligence. And we see, or there are three different segments that you can see. You can talk about artificial narrow intelligence. That's an AI that is better than humans in one specific task. For example, a smart speaker. If you ask your smart speaker for something, it can already give you quite fast, a quite huge amount of information that a human might not all have handy. Also, autonomous driving, in the best case, autonomous car would drive better than a human. I know it's not always the case yet, but that's definitely the plan. And of course, ChatGPT, which also gives a quite impressive feeling of smartness. Even it's not yet it's hard to say if it's smart or not, but at least it sounds smart and it feels smart. And going to the next level, we see artificial general intelligence, where an AI would be capable like humans in every field. And that's something that in my, I mean, in my idea, this is not yet realized. It's only envisioned in science fiction. For example, C3PO at Star Wars or iRobot, they are typical examples of robots that really feel like, wow, they are like humans, they are smart like humans, they behave like humans. And then there's another level, let's say that would be probably the final level or the final goal, or hard to say if we want to achieve that. It's the artificial superintelligence, and that's actually an AI that would be better than humans in every field. And it's more like hypothetical. If it has if it has really an understanding, an own mind, and some would refer this as technological singularity.
So that would be actually just one thing that would be just super smart and outsmart us all. And we have also seen this in science fiction. That's, for example, Skynet in Terminator. Not a very pleasant ending for us, but we can discuss this later. That's also something that you can discuss hours on that, because we're not here yet. We are actually, as I mentioned, we are still in the artificial narrow intelligence, even though that sometimes ChatGPT might fool us fool us in the way that we think it's very smart. It's still a very specific AI that does specific things, but as mentioned before, very good. So it does specific things, but in a very good way. And how does it work? Well, it's the generative pre-trained transformer, and it works because it uses a large-scale, unsupervised, autoregressive natural language model, and it has a huge amount of parameters. It basically predicts the next word. That was what I mentioned before. It's not smart per se. It's just full of awesome statistics based on a huge amount of data, which makes it answering stuff quite smart. Not everything, not in all cases, but for example, if you ask it questions on a specific text that you deliver, or if you ask for text summarization, generalization, or translation, that works very, very well. And it has some capabilities like a few-shot learning, which means that you can just give a very few examples on, for example, how you want your LinkedIn or Facebook post to look like. And with these few examples, ChatGPT or GPT in general would be able to use this as a template to learn it from your very little input, and is able to create LinkedIn posts or Facebook posts that just look similar, that looks like in the style that you have seen, that you want to have it, and that's called few-shot learning, and it's also quite impressive. Just to give it examples, and it uses these examples for further outputs. I mentioned also already how it works, but here's a little bit of an example. If you have a sentence that starts with the most famous city in California is San, and then in the what actually happens, there's statistics, and the most likely next word after San is Francisco, Diego, or Jose, and well, in this case, probably the sentence ends with Francisco, so San Francisco, and that's, let's say, the most important ingredient. It always predicts the next word, and in a way that it makes sense. And that's the impressive thing, that it really looks like the text makes sense. And we have seen some tricks in the past where you can fool it. We have seen also some other large language models that, for example, are not that good. For example, that repeats themselves. But GPT in the current version, in version 4, it really does a quite good job here in predicting the next word. The key concepts, there are basically two things: the prompt and the completion. So the prompt is your input, so what you give to GPT to work on, and the completion, it's the output. And there's just one important thing. There's a context window, and the context window is, let's say, the current brain of GPT, of the current session, and that's limited. And we use to measure this in tokens, and let's say 100 tokens are around 75 words. That's just important to know, because if you give GPT too much stuff, it just forgets half of it, or even worse, does weird things. So it's always important to know the context window. As I find, it's some of the most important thing, that it's not so well known. I was thinking of sharing a slide with you on that. And here you can see that if you use the current ChatGPT version, so you use GPT-4, and then you have a context window of around 8,000 token, which is around 6,000 words and 12 pages. The other GPTs that you can see here is, for example, GPT 3.5, which has just half of the context window, and it's used for the free version of ChatGPT. And there are some GPT models like GPT 32K that are only available via the OpenAI or the Azure OpenAI API. And with these APIs, you can access even larger context windows, like, for example, these 32,000 tokens that gives really, context window of 50 pages. That means that's already quite useful for many things. But as mentioned, if you use ChatGPT, then you're currently at a 12 pages limit, which is also good for many tasks. I just go quickly on a few examples where you can also see the use of GPT currently. It's, for example, embedded in applications like Power BI. Everyone who was working on data visualization knows that it's always sounds quite easy and simple if you say, yeah, can you please create a graph that shows this measure based on this dimension just for the last quarter and compare it to the quarter from last year. Things like that in natural language, they sound simple. So it's easy for me to ask such a request to somebody else. It's easy to ask the natural language to have actually an Power BI formula. This is actually the language DAX, or an Excel formula, or a Tableau formula, or whatever tool you want to use. Then you know that if you want to write that formula, it's not that simple anymore, and this formula can get quite complex. And if you're new to a tool, it can really be cumbersome. And having things like like GPT integrated in these tools, it really helps, because you give with your natural language the instructions, and GPT transforms this into this highly complex formula that, as mentioned before, might be easy for someone who works on these tools all the day for many years, but it's definitely not so easy for beginners. Another thing is, of course, a quite fun topic, DALI. So you can create images with your prompts. And well, next to DALI, you have, of course, things like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion. By the way, Stable Diffusion works on your own hardware. It's also interesting to see. And also the progress here goes quite fast. We have seen first DALI, then DALI 2. Now we are at DALI 3. DALI 3 is accessible, for example, with the Bing image creator. This is a DALI 3 example. I mean, if you just see that, I mean, DALI 3, it was kind of, you see, it was fun. It was fun to play, but DALI 3 gives you already quite cool output. I mean, this is actually a picture of the city Frankfurt with two iconic towers in the center. It's it should reassemble the Deutsche Bank towers. And if you have seen Frankfurt before, you know it's not 100% accurate, but you can definitely see that it's Frankfurt. You can also see the Commerzbank Tower a little bit in the right part of the image, because you can see the yellow spots that this Commerzbank Tower has. So it's definitely, I mean, you can definitely see that this should be Frankfurt, and it's already quite impressive. And as mentioned, if you want to try it, you can try this for free using the Microsoft Bing Image Creator. It's really a fun tool. You have certain amount of credits that refill after a certain amount of time. So that means you don't need to pay for that. You just need to wait until you get your new credits. It's definitely fun. And you can see I was giving here a prompt in a German language. So it doesn't need to be English. You can have it also in French, German, Spain. Most of the common languages work quite well. And I've seen that that I want to have two skyscrapers in Frankfurt in late autumn afternoon, and you can see that I got 4 images, and they could be definitely worth for a Times cover or a Spiegel cover. So I really like these already. And well, creating images, this also brings us to the stage where things also becomes quite difficult, or like where we can also now dive into the misinformation or the let's say more abusive nature of generative AI. And I would initiate this discussion with this viral deepfake. That's a deepfake, which is probably one of the most famous deepfakes right now. It's what was created with Midjourney, and it shows a picture of the Pope in a huge jacket. It's probably not his main style. I would doubt that that's the style that he's actually using. But it looks quite impressive. It looks really, really realistic. And he holds a coffee cup, and that brings, before we start the discussion, that brings also an idea of where you can still spot, if you look carefully, where you can still spot some mistakes that an AI still creates. So you can see shadows and lighting are not perfect. You can see if you look carefully, that the fingers don't really hold the cup. It's more like the cup is kind of hovering under the hands of the Pope. And you can also see that the chain around his neck is only half. So the other half is just missing. So it's still possible, if you look carefully, to spot quite a lot of flaws. I mean, in my idea, that's a matter of time. Let's say, wait a few more months or a few more years, and probably these flaws are also gone. And then it's getting really problematic, because if we discuss things like misinformation or fake news, fake images like this, they have been possible before. But before, you had to be really good in Photoshop, and it took hours. It could really took days in creating a perfect fake image. And this one, as mentioned, takes you seconds. And even this picture has many flaws. It was able to fool many people already. I mean, when this picture was released, there were many, many people that thought this picture is real, because, as mentioned before, these flaws, they are, I mean, they're not that easy to spot. You need to know where to look at. For example, you need to know that if you look into the eyes, usually the reflection in the eyes are usually something that AI makes wrong. But if you don't know where to look at, or if you don't have an idea that it's something that you have to look on, then it's quite easy to get fooled of that. And yes, I mean, that's just an interesting thing. Like, Oliver, do we already have some chat or some conversation or some discussions about you're mute?
Thanks a lot. So actually, the moment where you say you are ready, we can dive into the discussion. We will dive into the discussion. It's rather if you want to set the scene a little bit more, because you have some more slides, do not hesitate to do so. Besides, I already created a map.
Wow.
And so therefore, no worries. So I will moderate our discussion then afterwards a little bit while discussing with you. But if you still have some more slides, I would say do not hesitate to go through them right now, rather creating a little bit the spectrum of what we want to discuss afterwards. We already have some audience questions, and I just explained to Akin and Alex that they are also full in the discussion, so it will rather be the four of us that will discuss a little bit around what the audience said and what we said. Yeah.
Okay, maybe before we go into the discussion, then I will just add one more aspect. I don't have a specific slide for that, but it's a rather interesting thing, because if we talk about misinformation or fake news, we usually also talk about other ethnical aspects. And in this talk, we also want to cover some of the other ethical aspects. And one is definitely also the copyright aspect, or the ownership aspect. So let's just give a few thoughts about that, and then we can dive into the discussion. So, currently, it's I mean there are some cases that are to be ruled at a court, which is there's no decision yet, but some problems are already quite obvious, and that's, for example, if you want to create or if you create a picture of a real existing person. Imagine, for example, you're Johnny Depp, and probably you don't want that images of your likeliness are actually generated with generative AI. That's because of your face or your likeliness is your brand, and you earn money with that because you're an actor and you're paid by, I mean, for acting with your face and your appearance. So that's already problematic. So if you ask Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or DALL-E to create someone who is a real person who exists, let's say that's problem number one. That is that also from the rights perspective, I would rather doubt that it's a legal that it's a good way to do it or a good way to use the picture. So I would say if you create such a picture, it's definitely questionable if that's a thing that you can sell, for example. Because as mentioned before, because there's a person in, even it's not a real photograph, but it shows a person that is well that let's say owns the right of their identity. Um, if you want to go further in the discussion, then the question is also what about the training data? So all the data that is actually used to train these models, and that's also slightly problematic right now because the original creators, they're not paid at all for being used as training data, and that's also something that probably in the future will need to be fixed. I mean, there are ideas to be, I mean, how to fix things like that. I mean, for example, in Germany, we have an agency that is called GEMA. GEMA is an agency that distributes fees for music that is played somewhere, and artists get this collected fees just as a compensation when their music is played on festivals or on the radio. So there are some mechanisms already in other fields. Also, if you have I mean, I know that sounds quite old already, but if you think back about CD recorders or DVD recorders, these devices also had a special fee because it was able to replicate media. Same with Xerox machines. They also have a fee, and this fee is also spreaded for the original content creators. And I guess that might be also the case that will be valid later for at least for for-profit large language models, or for for-profit models at all in general, that there might be some way to compensate for the used training data. Um, I mean, if you think about really open source technologies like Stable Diffusion, which is, by the way, a very interesting project. It is initialized by the LMU, by a very famous university based in Munich, and this is completely open sourced. And if you take an open source project, then you could really argue the aspect of fair use. So you can say, okay, we use the training data, what we create is free, that's all cool. If you think about something that you need to pay for, like Midjourney, then it gets more tricky, because if a company earns money based on the training data provided by somebody else who was not even asked for being used into training data, I guess that's something that need to be served in the future. And as you hear I mean, as you can hear my wordings, it's there's nothing agreed, there's nothing decided so far. It's all in discussions. It's all a quite recent discussion, that's why there's not really a final decision on how this will be handled. But it's just another ethical aspect that we need to should have in mind if we talk about ethics and artificial intelligence. That's also let's say the source data is also a relevant thing that we should think about. And I guess now I really have told enough to setting the scene, and let's dive into the discussion.
Okay, wonderful. So thanks a lot. I will just hide yours. You don't have to do anything. I will just, for the audience, hide the slide for a second. If later you want to show a slide, don't worry, we can show that. I was just hiding it in the multi-view. Okay, so yeah, wonderful. So I loved it. It was the perfect start, and it was really setting the scene very nicely already. And as promised at the beginning today, the idea is to really use most of the time for discussion, and that's good. And so I will jump back a little bit to topics you covered already, and I will also get to some new topics. And so let's maybe first start with the humans that are affected by the technology. And who's affected by the technology? Every one of us is affected by the technology because we cannot not consume it, because pictures like the one with the Pope that you showed are out there. Serious media outlets started using the tools for creating a reality and so on. So it's part of our daily reality. It's interesting to remember that it's, as you said at the beginning, not long ago that it was not the case, and especially this realism was not there yet. First question that I want to discuss with you a bit is, what is the perception in the general public, and is it adequate? Is it overhyped? You already said something to it, but I think we can discuss a little bit also what we mean with this term overhyped. And yeah, let's maybe start with that. I will tell you then where I want to go. So what would you say? How do you perceive, and you means all four of us, but I'll start with our guest, of course. How do you perceive the perception when you look at your friends, when you look at maybe not your friends, but general people that are interacting with the technology? So how would you characterize the interaction with the current AI, generative AI technology?
Well, that's quite interesting because I had talks about this topic in the last 7 or 8 months, quite a lot. So I was talking about this quite a lot, and usually the talks also had discussions at the end, and it was quite interesting. Also, if you talk about this to people, even if they are in the tech field, and if they, I mean, that they're actually two fractions of people. There are people that haven't used these tools yet, so they have heard about it. They have heard about what GPT might be able of doing it, and of course, there are the people who already tried it. If they already tried it, they have a quite good idea on what it's capable of, obviously. But there's also a really large fraction also in the tech area that haven't tried it yet, and the fraction is even bigger outside the tech area. So I mean, for tech people, we might think that almost everyone has tried ChatGPT, but it's not the case. There are many people out there. They might have read about it in the newspaper, but they haven't tried it yet. And their perception about what AI is capable of, that's very interesting because it's a very wide range. I mean, you can really you hear really things like, "Wow, ChatGPT, it can't do anything. It's just a stupid statistics algorithm. That's very stupid thing. It can only give what people already said." So some people think that it's super dumb and it just repeats the knowledge that we humans already had in there, which well, let's say it's not that simple. and you have also, I mean, you also have people on the other side of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is that while we are doomed, we have already an artificial general intelligence, and GPT-5 will be so smart that it will be able to modify its own code and creates in Skynet kind of thing. So we can really see, let's say that the range is really that from GPT is super dumb to GPT is soon becoming general intelligence. So you can really see everything, and that's a quite interesting thing because if you compare this to other technical advances in the past, it was not that the range was not that wide. So when we went in the past discussing about things like going into the cloud, when we were discussing about basic machine learning, or well, programming languages at all, there was a quite narrow range on what people were thinking on what it is and what it can be, what it can be achieved. But now with AI, it's really a super wide range, and that's, let's say, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, very, very good. I don't know, Alex, I can, and the other Alex, you want to add something? You don't have to, just if you want to complete.
I could maybe add some
Okay, perfect.
bring some ideas from the questions of the audience to the discussion. So one point that appears in the questions was the fact that will it be possible with the generative AIs or chatbots like GPT-4, maybe GPT-5, to just have some ways to know that it is an AI, so to break the Turing test, or just maybe to have some prompts that can give this kind of information? Is it possible to program this in this kind of applications? And if not, is it possible to train AI on some specific data sets to teach users to how to behave with this kind of algorithm? The questions were about the fact that maybe in the future there is currently some issues with AI and generative AI, and maybe these issues will grow in the future. So, is it possible to use AI to just face these kinds of issues, in your opinion?
You mean the issue of misuse or about abusing
Yeah, for
the models?
instance, speaking to a chatbot and not knowing if it's a human with good intention, I will say, because he provide me a service from a company, or maybe bad intentions of man in the middle-ish kind of attacks, or even how to interact with this kind of algorithm, just to be sure that I know what I'm doing, because the difficulty I think now, and it was in the questions, it is a bit scary for some persons because yes, they don't know how to interact with this kind of artificial intelligences. If it's more near the singularity of only a tool, and between this both sides, it's always complicated. So, is it possible maybe to have information of how it work, and how can we be trained to understand how it work?
Well, yeah, it depends a little bit. For example, if you use the GPT models provided by OpenAI, then you can usually ask things like, what kind of model are you, for example? And then you get an answer of I'm GPT-3, for example. If that would be a human, it would be not answer with I'm GPT-3. So let's say you can ask the model about, I mean, you can see that it's an AI if you just ask it model-specific questions. It's more tricky if you use open source models, for example, the one that was released or published by Meta. So if you have something on your own on-prem workstation, if you really work on your own model, then probably you can fine-tune it in a way that it really is able to fool people, especially for man-in-the-middle attacks or for, let's say, I mean, you can imagine like cold calling agents that are machine-based. And the problem is here to identify if it's a human or not, is that first, the person who receives the text message, they need to get first an idea of that it can be a machine at all. I mean, there's a high probability that if it's a really good made chatbot, a bad chatbot, if it's really good made, that there's a high likeliness that it's not really, that the victim don't really get the idea that, wow, that can be a machine, and they don't even try to figure it out because they have no clue that it could be a machine. That's probably the biggest issue here right now. If the person would have a clue on that it's a machine, then as mentioned, then you can ask some tricky questions. For example, you can ask for something that is, one idea is to ask for a very late event. For example, you can ask what is running tonight on a certain TV channel, because as you know, the large language models, they are all based on a certain training set, and the training set is a completed or a set that is usually for example 6 months old, 12 months old. It's definitely not daily updated. So you can try to ask a question about a very recent event. You can even ask what's the weather outside today, for example, or something from the news. That would be, that you can definitely tell them if it's a machine or not, because the machine simply cannot answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe thanks, and that's very interesting, and you also noted some points to that. Maybe sticking a bit again to this, is it overhyped or not, we talked about. So your answer was a lot into, and all the discussion right now also was a lot in the direction of using the tool, interacting with the tool, and being aware that you do something with the tool. But in reality, when I open a newspaper and I see an AI-generated picture, or I look at a video and it's AI-generated, or I do a phone call and it's an AI-generated bot that is talking to me, I'm not aware of that. And that we talked about the Turing test is very interesting, because the big change to me is that the quality is sufficiently good today that you can be tricked, even though tricked is not the word I would use, so that you can believe that this is the reality. And one reason for why that is, to me, is also that our society today is a very fast society. And that means we are used to not take the time to validate facts and so on. And therefore, it's easier to fool us or to present fake reality as real reality to us today. The quality increased at the same time. And also, and this is another new aspect, the amount of fake things, being it text, being it pictures, being it videos, or more audio, that I can create is only limited by the resources that I have access to. And with that one, I mean, especially if I want to influence voting behavior, I can create with the generative language models. I can, or if I want to do phishing mails, I can personalize those things in an automated way and simply flood society. Phishing mail, okay, it's a phishing mail. But if we think back again on, I watch television and the entire TV channel is AI generated, and I don't know that. So I can flood many humans with a fully AI generated reality, and they don't even know it. And so this, from a societal point of view, this is super interesting, because it's for the first time that I can really fully automate the task. And jumping back again to make the point even more clear. So I'm also a media scientist. I was also studying this. And the big example in the beginning of the years 2000 was the Iraq War. Because there we had imagery that was controlled, that was produced in order to target the opinion of the world that is not locally present in certain directions. And this was expensive. It was not overly expensive, but it was expensive. It needed certain skills and people and tools and so on in order to do it. Today, with the attention span of most of the users today, if I create a TikTok video, for instance, that is fully AI generated, I think that will have a huge impact. If we think now about we as a society, we develop ourselves, and now we have this tool, and this tool is deeply embedded in our reality. Is that a dystopia, what I'm describing, or would you say this is already a reality in the perception of many?
I guess it, unfortunately, is the reality because the attention span is really, really quite low, thanks to new social media networks like TikTok, but also YouTube Shorts. I mean, many videos are very, very short. So, and they just play one after the other. So, the attention span is very short. And then we also see, I mean, let's say we see that it gets also, I mean, the use, especially in the political field, gets also more dramatic and more how to say it, it gets more let's say more violent or more radical. So I know that, I mean, quite soon we have the next election or in the US, and I really don't want to look forward to see what happens when Trump wants to be elected again, and how all this fake news machinery, which by the way, I mean, in his last when he was I mean, the last time when he was elected to president, there was also a new fake news thing, but it is I mean, there's the belief that this was mainly fueled by huge farms of real people. It is said that it might be I mean, it might be initiated by Russia, and that they had huge farms of people who really producing this fake news and spreading it all over Facebook and everywhere. But there was no generative AI yet. If we now, as you also mentioned before, it took quite some time. Also, if you don't think about pictures, if you just think about text, it takes also time to write some kind of meaningful text that fools people in a fake news way. But if you can do this now by a machine, and it's not only about creating some fake news, it's also of creating variants, because what you want, I mean, a fake news usually is more received if you have many variants on different platforms, because then you as a fake news target, then if you hear the news from various outlets, or let's say fake news outlets, then you think at the end it's true because you have heard it before, because you've heard it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. So it's also important to create these variations, and with generative AI, it's just a matter of seconds, and it can be also fully automated. And that's something that we didn't had last time when Trump was elected. It was all manual work. As mentioned before, there were probably some state-initiated farms, but without these farms, it's even more easy and more, let's say, it can be even more abusive. And it's not only a thing in the US. I mean, also in Germany, we have some state-level elections next year, and also here, I mean, we can already see an uprise in TikTok videos that are kind of suspicious, and many text-based messages that are very suspicious on Twitter, or which is called X now, which doesn't seem to be filtered at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is not a problem, by the way. I mean, but
Yeah. And so the just to re-emphasize that the one point you made, because I think this is something that is not necessarily clear to everybody. So with the AI, we are able to create a fake information from as many points of view as we want to do it. And so therefore, we would need a big amount of people in order to do that. And we can even almost live generate it. And therefore, we can plant an idea into our heads through as many channels as we want at almost no cost. And therefore, really influence the societal development to a point, in a controlled manner, to a point that we never had before, I would say. Because these, you call it Chinese armies, and so if these Chinese armies, they are still limited because they don't have an endless amount of people. They have a huge amount of people, but they have only a limited amount of people. With the AI, I just have to throw hardware. Hardware is cheap because of Moore's law, so we can easily add it. And then I can create an endless amount of these people. And this is, or the creators, and this is outnumbering us as humanity, as humans. And this, you mentioned super intelligence before as something where the AI successor or AI is taking over the world. And even though as we understand a bit the technology, we would say, yeah, the bits and pieces that are in are so simple, this is not how the world will be overtaken. We cannot forget that humans are communicating entities. And if you control the communication, which you can now do through these things, because you can generate things that seem realistic by just using these tools for our eyes, our ears, and also what we are reading. This is highly problematic and highly close already to this super intelligence thing. Not in the way we imagined in the science fiction before, that there are robots destroying the world or something like that, but it's a possibility of, one might call it, brainwashing or controlling the attention of the people to a level that we simply never had before. And while this is something where probably everybody would say, oh yeah, we have to stop it, we cannot stop it. The technology is out. And when I'm talking with students, often I pass the message: you are responsible for your creation. So you have to think about what you put into the world and how it can be used. Like when the atomic bomb was created, you cannot say, I was just a researcher and I just put it out and I did not think about the consequences. With the AI and with the generative language models, my perception is that the use surpasses by far the expectations of especially OpenAI, where they put the tool into the world. I think they did not expect that it could happen what is happening now. So going into the direction of responsibility that we have as people developing technology, and also responsibility for the tooling that was put out into the world by people that could have been us, because people at LMU are also normal researchers, normal people that are providing it. It's not a huge company that is behind. So it didn't really take too much to create it. It needed just a few brilliant people that did it timely at the right time. So how can we manage the responsibility as technical people, and how can we possibly evolve the society to better coexist and to better understand this technology? So this would be the next topic complex I would like to cover. And I would just, after having thrown so many things in, just let you react to it. You can grab any or all of them and just react a little bit to what I said.
Well, I think one of the most important things that, I mean, in the perfect world, most of the people, most of the citizens would gain some kind of skills that is called media potency or media literacy. So kind of a skill to really think on, does that really make sense? I should double check it in some serious newspapers. I should double check it, for example, using the Bing or the Google search engine just to see, because actually Bing and Google search engines, they also try to battle misinformation. So misinformations are usually downranked in favor of the real news, let's say the legitimate news. So, but let's say that would be the best case scenario, or let's say the wishful thinking. Unfortunately, I doubt that the majority of the world would gain some media literacy, and probably are just maybe just see some stories on Twitter, for example, that they might grab their attention, that might be completely false, but as it's so attention grabbing, they hit the retweet button and spread it around. And I guess that's more the realistic thinking. And well, to also get some sense about the or some ideas about the models, and if the models can get some or can create some inbuilt responsibility, then yes, actually, if you ask models that are only available as an online service, for example, ChatGPT, then the company that is providing it, in this case, OpenAI, of course, they have some built-in mechanisms, for example, that you cannot use it to ask for creating a bomb, or you can also not use it to, if you ask create misinformation, and it says, no, I don't do that. So there are some filters in this also. I mean, try to avoid bias. It also tries to, it tries to avoid many abusive things. But here it's, especially if you look now into the open source world, these models also, of course, incorporate these non-abusive these not abusive restrictions. But as it's open source, you can just unimplement these things. And that happened, for example, with Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion, I mean, you can just go to Hugging Face, and Hugging Face is full of models that you can just download, load in your Stable Diffusion environment, and suddenly it can create all kind of nudity, for example. It can create celebrities that seem to be like nude. That's stuff that is not possible in DALL-E or Midjourney, because these online services, they prevent it. But in open source, this is kind of, you cannot really limit things in open source, because that's the nature of open source. And that gets really tricky here. And that loops me back to my initial thought. The only solution is really media literacy, that people really get aware of, well, that probably is not right, that can't be true. And it's also probably something that is rather taught earlier than later. So probably this is something that people in elementary school, children in elementary school, should already learn, that stuff that they see might not be true.
Mm-hmm. And I fully agree with what you say, but just spinning the thought further, more and more also legitimate users that want to create real news are using the tools. So I was, for instance, at the biggest European cyber event, European Cyber Week here in Rennes this week, actually until yesterday. And when I wanted to do the press release, what I was doing is I was just writing, okay, this is what I would write, but it doesn't read so well. I gave it to ChatGPT and I said, like, yeah, okay, I want to do a press release. I want to target these and those audiences. Could you please spice it up and provide me something? And then it did its job. The result is quite nice. You can read it on our website. But the tooling has with that a huge influence on my wording, on the context that I present, and so on. And so that means there might come a time where you cannot differentiate because there's almost no content that is generated without AI. And it also makes sense. And in that direction, maybe let's start with that part. So when the generative AI came, and when AI, the discussion until 1 year ago was always like, oh yeah, it will replace mechanical tasks and so on. In reality, with the tools you were talking about, what it's replacing is a creative work. So it's replacing the writing. It's a friend of ours is working on screen backgrounds for cartoon movies. So it's replacing the entire work of these digital artists and so on. What do you think about that the anticipation of the society for the technology was totally different from the reality? Yeah, maybe you can already...
A point of information here. Possible. So I really wanted to also come to this point. Okay, a little bit of maybe some background. So, for example, Kafka is one of my favorite authors. All right, and that's why I have read all text produced by Kafka. No more Kafka for me. It's sad. What happened is with ChatGPT, one of my first prompts was, please write a short story like Kafka. And he wrote a story like Kafka, which was awesome. As a reader, I got the same pleasure like I was reading Kafka. And this is no problem. This is very innocent. I'm just a reader who wants to read more Kafka, but he is dead. The problem is there are living authors that their works are used for training. And now you can ask ChatGPT, please write a short story just like Jonathan Franzen, a US author that I really also like, but who is pissed off that... So exactly the same point like Professor Pal tried to broad. So with this creative, so with images, it's a bit more complex, but with text, it's more come down to ChatGPT does. So, and authors creates nothing but text. This is its only income. No image, no video, no audio. So Jonathan Franzen writes a 500 page long book. ChatGPT can do like Jonathan Franzen. So who is pissed off with the training data? So how do we solve this problem? Is there a problem? Probably there's a problem, there's a complaint. Who is right, who is wrong?
And just before you answer, as a quick add-on, so I was sharing with Alex a cartoon image where you had a fishing pond, and then there was like the artist, so the creator, and the creator was fishing, so he was taking the pearls out of the pond and preparing them in a new way. And then there was the AI, and the AI was fishing in the bucket of the creative person. And this is exactly what you just described. It's like you create a body of brilliant stuff, and we have a lot of that with our society today. And then we can use it in such tools to remix it in ways that we never had before. But I just wanted to add this to you, to the point that you said. So very, very good point. So any comments from our guest to that?
Yeah, well, there are actually two aspects. One aspect is, of course, is it legitimate? Is it okay? Is it? I mean, how do we justify that the training data contains books of living authors, for example? That's one problem that I mentioned already before in the talk, and it's a quite complex thing because the copyright law has actually a clause that is called fair use, and the problem here is, or the thing is, if you run a free service or in an open source project, then of course you can say, well, it's fair use, because there are other projects like archive.org that are also collecting contents. Even search engines crawl plenty of content, and it's all about fair use. The more difficult stuff begins if you charge money. That's also, I mean, That's first true for the AI service providers. So, for example, Midjourney now doesn't have a free version. It always costs money. There's the big question: can they say it's fair use? But that's a question that is currently discussed also at Kurtz. So that's one aspect, and the other aspect is just that asking, for example, GPT to create a new Game of Thrones story. And this happened also before, and it also sparked a controversy. I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones. I've read the books, I've seen the TV show. It's really fantastic. I think it also here depends on what your intention at the end is if you create such a spin-off, because spin-offs, or let's say there is a term that is called fan fiction that happened also before. So we could write a book about Game of Thrones without any AI help, and it would be considered as fan fiction as long as we don't earn money with it. Then there are certain fan fiction web pages. I guess it's kind of people won't complain about it. It's more a problem if you want to earn money with it. If you put it on Amazon and if you add a price tag and say I want to have $5 for the book, then it's a huge problem, because then you basically use IP, intellectual property, created by someone else. And if you create this with AI, that's AI in this case for me it's more like a tool. It was a problem before. I mean, if you do it without AI, the problem with AI is just the scale, because now you can do it in a much faster way. I mean, there are I've seen that there are people that create one book per day and spam it on Amazon. That means Amazon is largely spammed by AI created books already. So the scale is it's just a huge matter of scale right now, and that makes the thing, I mean, that issue that prominent.
And I don't know if you want to jump in, Akin, again, don't hesitate to do so, but I will also continue in that direction. So you were talking about content creation, and content is also used for learning. And I'm also with ProLehre from TUM and so on. I'm following a bit the developments there, and the ChatGPT and similar are great tools for improving learning material, adapting learning material, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, they're also used by students in order to access a topic. So I have a nice anecdote that I like to share with it. When ChatGPT came on the market, I have regular meetings with my PhD students here at IMT Atlantique, and I was having a meeting with them, and I was discussing with them on the use, and I was presenting the tool to them, and I told them, like, okay, you can use it, but you have to attribute it and so on. In the next meeting, one of the students came back to me and said, like, oh, it's such a great tool. I spent an entire day discussing with it on my topic. So it was really like a sparring partner, someone discussing with a big knowledge base in the background. So we spent a day on that. And then the day after, he thought, like, yeah, okay, I'm a scientist. So even though I discussed it with ChatGPT, I have to give it some matters. I have to use the sources and so on. So he asked ChatGPT, okay, cool, yeah, what are the sources I can use to follow up on that? And it created some realistic sounding sources, and none of the sources existed. So this is again it creates something that seems realistic to us. In reality, it's not real, but it's now in the context of learning. So we really want to develop ourselves further. So can you share something about the pros of such technology in order to learn better, and the cons possibly? Some thoughts there.
Well, the problem that you described here is because if an information doesn't exist in the training model, then there's a high chance that GPT won't tell you that it doesn't know it. It just makes something up. So it creates a paper title that really sounds cool. it even creates author names that also sounds realistic, and say that, well, that was a paper published in Cambridge, for example. It all sounds useful or realistic, but it's not. That probably will be solved as these large language models lately gained web access. So it's possible now that they can actually crawl the internet. It slows down the process,
Bing
but they
doesn't
can
have this
actually.
problem, right?
Huh?
Bing doesn't
Bing
have
doesn't
this
have the problem
problem.
because
Yeah.
Bing has this web interface. Also, the current version of GPT-4, if you have a paid GPT Plus account, then you also have this web access right now. So with Bing and GPT-4, with web access, there's a possibility that you can get real papers that fits. But at the end, if you ask something too specific, there is always a chance the GPT hallucinates. So if something is not known, it might make something up. Not only, I mean, it's not limited to paper titles. It can be also facts, that it makes up some facts just because it sounds cool, and this is due to the statistical nature of this large language models, because as mentioned before, it always predicts the next word. And if that next word makes sense for the model, then it presents that to you. And if it's wrong, then it's bad luck for the for the regressor. Yeah.
And in that context, are we already lost today because ChatGPT is out, and therefore we have a ton of fake news that will become part of our training body because we cannot detect if they were fake news or not? So is it possible after November 2022 to still crawl the internet and use this as body for learning something that is real? Because in the end, it will not make much of a difference if you want to create science fiction, because it's just more fiction as body that you have in there. So you might get less human-like creative, but maybe more machine-like creative. But is there a point of return if we go only back to the technology to say, like, okay, if I want to create it today, I take the Google snapshot from today or the Bing snapshot of the internet from today and feed it into my training models, and it will be something useful? So how much degraded, if we take it should be as real as possible as metric, how much degraded would it be today? Is it already a huge problem from the technology point of view, or is it like it will be solved because we will be able to detect it?
No, it really depends. I mean, we use the session now to talk a lot about misusive or abusive use cases of GPT, but of course there are also plenty of legitimate use cases, and I really like the use cases where online newspapers even mention that they use artificial intelligence, and some do it already, and they just do it to get a better, for example, to improve, to be faster in proofreading. So imagine that you have written a good draft of a story, but it's not yet smooth. So if you give it to GPT and say, please make it smooth, especially if it's not your mother tongue, so if you write another language, then it really helps you to make it smooth. But this doesn't mean that this doesn't mean that it's bad content. It just means that it took your ideas, your thoughts, and it made a better story out of it. So that's not a problematic point. That's actually, I would say, that's the good use of technologies like GPT. And I also applied it. I mean, I run an own personal blog. It's alexloth.com. I run this blog since over 15 years now already. I started when I went to do my internship in India, Bangalore. It was another great story, but it doesn't really relate now to to our topic. But it was a great time actually. I started my blog there, and I mean, the reason about why I'm talking now about my blog is this is a completely personal project. Just for me to store my ideas. It was kind of an journal. At my time in Bangalore, I was writing down what I was experiencing. So it was more kind of an open diary or something like that. Usually, if you run a blog or a web page, it's usually the best practice that you also see SEO optimize it.
Mhm.
The minimum that you usually should do is to provide a meta description. That's the little part that Google shows you in the search results, and a so-called SEO title. That's the title snippet. That's usually best practices, but I never did it because I didn't want to waste the time on writing these small snippets that should fit exactly in a specific range of characters. It's very specific. I didn't want to do it because it was a personal project just basically for myself, for friends, and for family. But now with GPT, of course, I can ask GPT, please write an SEO title for that with a length of 150 characters, or write a meta description, a captive meta description that mentions artificial intelligence, for example. So, I mean, these are things like it increases the productivity because I knew that this stuff is useful to do it. I just did not it because I didn't want to waste the time on that. With GPT, I can do it now, and that's the positive effects of GPT. It just increases humanity's general effectiveness. Everyone can achieve more. That's the very good thing. And now, if we want to have again a look on the more bad side, there are many websites right now that are really completely machine generated, and you can see that because some parts of these web pages, they feel like they are out of context. They feel like they're just random. That you can see that if you check out what is in general on this web page, and if it's completely random stuff that is that partly doesn't make sense, then there's a high risk that it's machine generated. And I've seen these web pages, and I knew that, wow, that's completely GPT generated without anybody checking if it's true or not. It's just GPT generated, and there's a high likeliness now that we get some algorithms that will identify such content. And if algorithms are able to identify at least these very bad generated stuff, then it's probably a possibility to exclude them from search results at Google, at Bing, and to exclude them from the training set for future training. I have no idea if it's happening, and I have no idea how good the algorithms really will be in identifying it. I guess they won't identify it if you have the good use. So if you have your own story and you just, let's say, improve it slightly by GPT, I guess they won't catch that. But as mentioned before, that's not a problem. So if you improve your own content a little bit, that's okay. That's not an abusive thing. The very bad stuff, I guess it's more likely to identify them, and that's, let's say, that's a good. There will be a good outcome actually if that happens.
Okay, yeah. And so this is the good use. I agree with you. It's a good use, but there's still a risk because when I think about the first AI chatbot that was largely put online that turned into a racist just because it had a lot of training data in that direction. The AI, as it's working with statistics, if it is fed with the wrong subtext information, wrong in the sense now what I want to communicate, there might be subtle messages in all its creations that I don't see at first, but that are still influencing others. But this is very philosophical now, so I just wanted to add this risk point. At the same time, it's also very good that you said we are only talking about risks and dangers and so on, because it's totally right. I mean, the reason why we mainly talk about that is that we cannot get rid of the tooling, and therefore I want to sensibilize people a little bit about, okay, so it's something that is affecting you, and you really should know more about it in order to question yourself, because it could influence you. The positive use is perfect. I mean, we have for the first time the possibility to have really complex things reduced down in a very high quality way. And this gives us really totally new access to information. And therefore, also when I said this thing with the learning, how people use it, so I would say it's wonderful. So I mean, we can really access everything, even niche topics, and get something meaningful about it and so on that we didn't have before. So we don't need the human expert in that field anymore. And it's also different from Wikipedia, because it's not somebody curated it and put some info in a certain way where I wanted to have it, but it's interactive. So I can say, okay, tell me more about this aspect. Oh yeah, cool, I will dive with you into it. So it's really more in a dialogue form. And I think this is really, really captivating.
But there is also a poisoning problem within Wikipedia too, with controversial articles.
Yeah, very, very, very good point. And then there's again this argument that Alex was pushing, which is the scale. So in Wikipedia, it's very good what you mentioned, because when you look at the author statistics, you have also very few people that are contributing most of the content in Wikipedia, and that puts those people into a huge position of power.
Yeah.
So with the computer-generated information, it might be even more fair, because you can express more what was happening, and it's more deterministic is the wrong way, but it's more transparent in the sense that at least you know the steps, what is happening. Yeah. And if it's an open tool, you have at least this access. But it's fooling us, because we are not asking these questions, and to ask these questions, we would need this AI literacy. And maybe the time is already progressing, maybe to two more topics to cover. So the first one, technological topic. So you said it already in your introduction, but maybe Alex, just say once again, how is the technology working? So what is the simple mechanism behind that is enough to fool us to believe that a human person was creating the content?
Well, the basic technology behind it is that a word is predicted after the next word is predicted after the next word. And while this is completely based on statistics, it really gives an interesting and an realistic sounding output. And that is something that that is also evolving quite a lot, also because of the huge amount of parameters. We have now over 175 billions of parameters. For example, GPT-3 or GPT-2 had fractions of it. So the parameters and training data, they are just they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And again, it's statistics behind it, but what we see behind that. And if we see how good GPT-4 fools us in believing that it's smart and intelligence, I guess GPT-5 will blow us away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this brings us to the last point, which is so in was it this week? So Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, was fired, and one of the stories that I read is that so OpenAI was first created as a foundation to develop AI for good, and then it also became something that was commercial, where the GPT then came out, which was also commercialized. I read that Sam Altman was more on the commercialization side, while another board member and co-founder was more on the openness and responsibility side. That might not exclude each other at all. And so there I read, so the one reason for that discussion right now might have been that the next ChatGPT version is so powerful that even internal to the company, they have discussions on if we should release it or not. And the people that are more to market side, they're like, oh yeah, let's put it out immediately. Let's see what it's doing. And the others are more like, okay, we have to do a moratorium so that we understand the technology before pushing it out. Is more regulation needed, and and at the same time I always have the question, is it even possible? My personal answer would be no for the second, which then implies that we can also say no to the first, because if we don't have a mean for regulating it in a meaningful way, we don't have to regulate it. Any thoughts to that?
Well, regulation is a difficult topic here, and especially about the thing that you mentioned about being careful versus being commercially successful. That's of course a thing that many companies are considering, because it's an I mean, it's not a straightforward choice. Just imagine that you're an AI company and you're very careful. Then it will probably slow down your development, and your competition might be faster than you, might be more successful than you, because it's quicker with its AI deployments. So it's a difficult thing to have the right balance. But of course, the big tech companies are aware of their responsibility, and it's quite important to find the right balance. If we look to this topic a little bit on a broader way, because we were discussing also the topic of misinformation, I think that the regulation, I mean, yes, it's important to talk about regulation, but the question is, do we really need to regulate the tools? I mean, if you see GPT or Midjourney or Stable Diffusion as tools like Photoshop or like Excel or Word, the question is, do you need to regulate the tools? I mean, you can also create fake pictures in Photoshop, and Photoshop is not regulated. I mean, you can create all kind of weird stuff in Photoshop. It was never regulated. Photoshop is around since decades. It's a brilliant tool, by the way. I really love it, but it's not regulated. The question is, do we need more regulation in the AI space, or do we need to regulate the platforms? I mean, the platforms that's where misinformation is spreaded. For example, do we need to enforce that, for example, TikTok or Twitter, X, or Instagram or whatever, do we need to enforce that they immediately delete hate speech, for example? Because in my understanding, there's a little bit of a misconception between fake news or hate speech and free speech, because in my understanding, hate speech is not free speech. But I know that some people see that differently and say, well, we want to allow everything on our platform. But I guess, or in my idea, the regulation would be better suited on these platforms where this abusive content is actually spreaded.
This is in line with Karl Popper, who of course fought against Nazism and such ideas. So we can tolerate everything except intolerance. So we cannot tolerate intolerance. This is like really in line with Mr. Loth's last comment.
Very good. So great. I will. So what I would love to do, if those of you want to express one take home that you have from today's session. So talk a little bit so that you have a little bit of time to think about it. So yeah, it was a really great discussion. I loved the format, and I also really loved the different topics that we covered. So as said before, I really walked a little bit through our three mind maps here. So it was a very nice spectrum, and I think we really got a very good overview on relevant points. We have many more relevant points, but already if the people followed us with those that we raised, their AI literacy will have increased significantly, which will be a great outcome of today's exchange. So my point would be generative AI is a great tool. We have wonderful opportunities. It really allows us to do lots of really cool things. The biggest challenge, and I agree fully with Alex on that, the biggest challenge I also see is how can we make society ready to use, to accept such tools as coexisting entities in the communication space in an educated way. So how can we increase this literacy so that for people, it will be normal that there is AI-generated content and normal content, and they will be at ease in using it and not be fooled and tricked because they have more competency about the access to it. Who wants to add, to agree, to say something as last words?
I have few words for it, but yeah, it's very general, but I do agree with everything that was said today. But the idea is maybe who watches the Watchmen or quis custodiet ipsos custodies. So should we improve the control of government, of European Union, I don't know, or should we increase the control of big companies, or should we better teach the users or the society to what should we do, what can we do with this kind of tools, and what will it be possible to do in the future. So I think the the good point of today's presentation about generative AI was it is a very, as you said, a very brilliant tool. We can do lots of weird things with that, but we just need to be aware not to be scared of it. But it requires some time and maybe yes, some efforts to try to explain it and try to make better explanation about it. As today.
Again, some thoughts?
Yes, very quick comment. So we've been discussing about the authenticity of the content so far. How can we make sure that the audio is authentic, the video is authentic, the text is authentic, is a fake news or not? But discarding the credibility of the source all the way along. I think this is what we should bring into the picture. If I write a piece of paper, the earth is flat. And make this lying around. Someone else finds this paper and reads the earth is flat. He will think that, well, anybody can write this paper. It doesn't mean that this content is true. Just like so, any video can be fake, any audio can be fake. Then what do we trust? We trust the credibility of the source. BBC, high credibility. New York Times, high credibility. Some other media company, low credibility. I think this brings us to problem, the authenticity of the source. When it's written a BBC headline, how do we make sure this is really BBC? So now it's like a IT security problem, authenticity. As long as we make sure the source is the real source, its content depends on the credibility of the source. Point.
Very, very, very good point. And then I give our guest the last conclusion words before I do the closing. So,
well, just to follow up on the previous thoughts, it's I mean yes, it's or no, let's take one step back about again about regulation. I guess in the European Union, if we want to regulate even more, we might have hard times to catch up, because what the European Union also has on its agenda is to catch up on AI development. So we want to, also become an AI player beside the US and besides China. And if we do regulate AI too much, I guess that becomes problematic in catching up. So that's one idea that I like to share here. And about authenticity, I mean, to see if news or some fraction of news is really true, I guess it's really a valid point. And there might be, I mean, there are also ideas like, for example, using watermarks. So to try to set if something is AI generated. If, for example, in pictures, it's quite easy to embed an invisible watermark. There are possibilities in here. Problem is, if if it's shared on Twitter, if the viewer really cares about the embedded watermark, that's another issue then. And also for creating embedding watermarks in text, which is also possible, but it's quite easy to to work around them. That means, I mean, well, to conclude this, we have to pay attention, and we have to to try to teach and educate people around the world to understand that AI is a useful tool, and to try to understand it can be also used in bad ways, and that it's probably the best thing to question if they see something before spreading it even further. So really to question it, unless you're very sure it's from the BBC, then it might be better to doubt if it's really an authentic video or picture.
Cool. Very, very good. And I really, I mean, I really missed the series because it's really about talking with exciting people about exciting topics. And I was really excited today to talk with you about the topic with all three of you. And so, yeah, big thank you to Alexander Gabil, big thank you to Erkin Kedan, and big thank you to you, Alexander Loth, for today's edition. So I think we really created something useful in order to raise this literacy, and we'll also cut it a little bit into pieces, and then we can all share it and so on. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. Thank you so much for being with us today. Regarding the speaker series, so the next edition will be on the 13th of December already. It will be with Myriad Medak. She's at MIT, and it will also be an AI-related topic. I'm quite sure about that. We don't have the title yet. But yeah, so this will be then the last edition for the year, and I'm currently planning already editions for the next year. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having hopefully as exciting editions as we had today. So thank you very much, and see you on the 13th. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Cher CyberCN, pôle d'excellence région Bretagne. Au revoir et à la prochaine.